What's happening, everyone? My name is James Lynch, and this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. We'll get to them as soon as you can. And I say we because I'm going to be joined a little bit later by a returning guest on this show, Stephen Ellis of Daily Faceoff. We're going to talk things all Toronto Maple Leafs. He's obviously great at that, and obviously, the prospects and everything else that's going on. So we'll get a lot of stuff from Stephen in just a little bit here, probably around 12:30 Eastern. So I'm going to ramble for a bit, answer your questions, and keep posting your questions because I'll get to them throughout the stream here today. We got a lot to get into, like we usually do when we start. First, just want to remind you guys to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. If you want to submit questions, you got to subscribe to the channel. It takes 2 seconds to do that. We already got a question in from my good buddy John, so we'll start there first. I'm still a tad worried about the goaltending position, both due to injury and unproven play in the playoffs, but hopefully you can grab a decent 1B backup at the deadline, Vladar or something. I'm assuming you're referring to the Leafs. Yeah, it'll be something we'll have to ask Stephen about for sure. Stolarz has been the answer for the Leafs this season. It's been great in terms of what he's been able to do. And, the Leafs haven't had, I hate dating myself here, but the Leafs really haven't had like a solid proven goaltender in quite some time. It's been this sort of mishmash between, getting these guys on cheaper contracts, Ilya Samsonov, you had Frederik Andersen. You've had so many goaltenders go through the Leafs over the years, and they just haven't had that solid goaltender, the solid, guy in between the pipes that they can rely on. I know they hoped that was going to be Joseph Woll, but he seems very injury prone. So like I said, we'll get into all that with Steven, but I think this is a topic worth discussing. Is this the year that the Leafs can go on a run? That's something I want to ask Steven about, because I don't know. I kind of watch from afar and keep tabs, and the Leafs obviously doing quite well in the Eastern Conference this year, but is that something they can sustain in the playoffs? He's also got Mitch Marner's contract looming over this team in terms of what are they going to do with him? Are they going to re-sign him? Are they going to trade him? There's actually a lot of interesting UFAs coming up at the end of the year, so a lot of big moves to make. Of course, we're going to talk a little Vancouver Canucks. They lost again last night. You should see the group chat I'm in with some of my friends when it comes to the Canucks. People are fed up. It's as simple as that, where, you come off this big one over Edmonton on Saturday, and then you follow it up losing to the Sabres, who are a non-playoff team. It's just really frustrating in Vancouver. Let's get into all the scores from last night. Actually, we got a couple more questions here. We'll go here from Jay. What did you think of the McDavid suspension? I'm shocked they did. He's kind of the golden boy of the NHL. That's something I want to bring up with Steven as well, because I know in Vancouver, listen, could they have done 2 games? Absolutely. But it's still a penalty. And even Connor Garland, after the game, admitted, yeah, I held on to McDavid. The refs didn't call it. But that's part of the game, is that strategy of like, how much can you get away with? So, I'm of the belief that I don't care if you're a superstar. It sucks for people who bought tickets, because McDavid will not be in the game for Oilers are going to be playing Vancouver later this week. McDavid's not going to be there. So if you bought tickets, you're not going to get to see McDavid play. However, I'm of the belief as well that just because you're a star player, you can't not get suspended for a cross-check to the head. This reminds me of the whole Austin Matthews situation with, I think it was Rasmus Dahlin a few years ago at the outdoor game. Same sort of thing. Like, you have to penalize the players equally. You can't just do it because someone's a star player. So, and I thought, I don't think I'm the only one here, and we'll get into this with Steven as well. The statement released by the Oilers yesterday, come on. Like, they made it out like, this was some like travesty. He got a couple games suspension. I just think bad look on the Oilers for doing that. And McDavid's probably embarrassed by the whole thing too. I don't think he wanted the team to release a statement there. It just looks really petty, more than anything. So, the defense and forwards are very good. The new coaching system under Berube has really worked out. Yes, it does seem like the coaching bump finally for the Leafs has sort of worked out. And, Berube's proven. The guys won a Stanley Cup with St. Louis. It seems like it's been a good fit, and a guy who can handle, the media pressure as well. That's part of it. Like, it's not just that you sign up to coach the Leafs, it's that you sign up to deal with the pressure of everything. The Leafs lose a game, the world's falling. The Leafs win a game, they're back in it. A lot of UFAs this summer. I heard cap is going to go up to $97 million. Very interesting. I heard the same thing. So that's what I mean. Some of these teams have some big decisions to make. Brutal loss for the Canucks. Yeah, I'm at the point now where I just watch the highlights the next day. Like, I'm not going to stay up and watch them lose to Buffalo. I can't do it. I can't do it at this point. This reminds me a couple seasons ago. Like, I just would not watch games if they went, later. And, I go to bed pretty early, but I just you just can't rely on it. Last season though, I would stay up for every game because they would come back, or they would, give a good push, the Canucks. And this year it's been non-existent. There's no heart in the team. They can't seem to, hold a lead. They can't seem to come back if they're down. It's just not a good situation. And it's unfortunate because, this whole JT Miller thing. Like, this reminds me of Boudreau all over again, where the Canucks took forever to fire Bruce Boudreau, and it affected the team. It was a distraction. The same thing is happening here with JT Miller in terms of, it's obviously a distraction. But I think even outside all that, they still need to make a move, whether it's, trade Miller. Brock Besser's a name where if Brock's not staying here, if you don't see Brock Besser in the Canucks' long-term plans, he's a guy you got to look at moving as well. So there's a lot of things going on. But let's get into some of the scores from last night. Keep the questions coming, John and Jay. Really appreciate you guys tuning in here today. Let's look at some of the action from last night. One of the results that surprised me a bit, look at this. The Rangers, 5-0 over the Senators last night. Ottawa, I think I speak for a lot of Canadians. I'm pulling for them. I want them to make the playoffs. It's been a lot of suffering for Ottawa the last couple of years, not since they, basically made it to the finals. It's been a rough go here. They had the backup in net. So, obviously they're struggling right now without having Ullmark in net, and that's been a big hole for them. But you look at it there, just 14 saves on 16 shots. And then Anton Forsberg, 10 saves with 13 shots. So not good. That's what basically lost them the game last night. Although your forwards have got to do something here too. Not a lot of offense there. The Rangers leading the way. Adam Fox with 2 assists. Lafreniere, who I know Canucks fans are hoping will be in that JT Miller deal, although we'll see what goes on there. Panarin and Rempe getting goals as well. So Sturkin, not a busy night there. That's the other thing with Ottawa. Like, okay, your goaltending's not good, but you got to get more than 20 shots on net. You're not the Canucks. You're not playing like a super defensive game. So they got to step it up a little bit. So yeah, tough loss there for Ottawa. They dropped to 24-19-4. The Rangers, 23 wins, 20 losses, 4 overtime losses for them. We'll take a look at the standings in a second as well. Okay. We got the Flyers beating the Red Wings. Good for the Flyers. The Canadians continue to make their push for the playoffs. Huge win there over the Tampa Bay Lightning yesterday. Sam Montembeault, I believe, was starting last night for look at this, 33 saves. This is the type of goaltending you want. And let's be honest, a big reason the Canadians are where they are right now is because of goaltending. They're getting that solid foundation, and, same sort of thing. They finally have a goaltender in net, like Carey Price, like someone that they can rely on. And you look at it again, Lane Hudson with an assist. He's having a great season. Patrick Laine has been a great addition for them. So things are really coming together for the Montreal Canadiens. See Alexander Carrier, who they got from Nashville earlier in the season. That's been working out for the Lightning. I'd have to look at their record, but I feel like they've been stumbling a lot as of late. So they're going to need to make a move here soon if they want to have any success. Remember their big acquisition in the offseason, Jake Getzel. It's worked out, but also Tampa Bay, I think, was hoping to take a bit of a step forward this year. You had the Hurricanes beat the Stars. The Stars are another team that are slightly struggling here a little bit with the Canes. You got, decent shot attempts on either side. Although saying that, Ottinger only having to, Carolina, I know they're a bit more defensive as well, but you got to get more than 19 shots on Jake Ottinger. That's not great for the Canes, but it's enough to get them the win. They improved to 29-16-3. We'll go through a couple of these other games here quickly. The Predators, what a wild game this was. Check out this box score here. So first off, going into this game, the Predators were like minus 440 on the betting line. And I was talking on my MMA show yesterday about how, you might want to throw a little bit on the Sharks because that line's a little crazy. Now, I didn't end up making a bet. Thank God I didn't, because the Sharks absolutely blew it. They were up 4-1 in the first period, and here comes back Nashville with 4 goals in the third period to win the game. I still don't think the Predators are going to make the playoffs, but this is very encouraging that a team can come back. And Georgiev, 40 shots. The Sharks have got to do a better job on the defensive end of things, letting in that much. So again, UC Saros, and they had to split the goaltender here too as well. So that's kind of interesting. The Capitals defeating the Oilers. The Oilers losing another game here, another key game here. The Capitals getting the win on the road. Look at the Capitals, 32-10-5 at the top of the East right now. Pierre-Luc Dubois, a goal and an assist. And Logan Thompson continuing his great season as well. Stuart Skinner, just 11 saves on 14 shots. Not great. The Panthers beating the Ducks, not much to say there. And then, the Sabres and the Canucks. Again, Canucks with 2 goals in the second. You think things are looking good. And then the third period, Buffalo just dominates them here. And the Canucks end up losing their 16th game of the season. They are now 20-26 on the season. Not good at all. That's not going to get it done. And again, the Canucks did get a bit more offense here. 34 shots on Jukka-Pekka Laine. But the Canucks, Thatcher Demco not having a great game either. There is some question as to if he's going to rebound at all this season. We'll have to see on that. Let's have a quick look at the standings, and then we'll get to your questions here. Just to give an idea of where the teams are at right now, I was kind of getting a good look here. We'll go over here. So I mentioned the Capitals. They are at the top of the East right now, still with 69 points. They even have a game in hand on the Leafs and the Hurricanes and the Panthers too, and the Devils. So they're leading the way right now. It's just a great story. Spencer Carberry, that whole team. It just seems like everything is clicking for Washington this year, and it's great to see, especially with Ovechkin making that push for Gretzky's record. You got the Leafs in second. That's again why I wanted to get Steven on here. Is this the year they can do it? Leafs always play well in the regular season. It's a matter of doing it in the playoffs. Hurricanes, Panthers, Devils, Lightning, no surprises there. Ottawa's still in seventh despite their loss last night, and the Canadiens in the eighth spot. It's these teams here that you got to keep an eye on. Columbus, Boston, New York are the teams that are going to be making a push here. And I think these teams, we heard earlier this week, by the way, Pittsburgh looking to do a bit of a fire sale. We'll see if Kyle Dubas makes any moves. They have a couple of UFAs and some big decisions on some of their players as well. And in the West, it's a little bit closer. You got the Jets at 65 points, although they've had some issues. Vegas has been struggling a bit. That's why they're a couple points behind Winnipeg right now. You got the Oilers third. You got the Wild fourth. Stars fifth. Sixth are the Avs. Seventh are the Kings. And then the Canucks and the Flames kind of battling out there. Vancouver with a game in hand and Calgary with a point ahead. So that's never great in these situations. But yeah, the Canucks and Blues tied there. I always like doing the points percentage here. So really, if you look at it, Canucks are still on the outside looking in, even with the games played. And in the Eastern Conference, same sort of deal here. Pretty much the same, with Columbus being a little bit more ahead than they were over the Bruins just because of that game in hand. Let's get to your questions, everyone. Keep it going. We spoke on it a bit with this recent news about Demco. Would you move him this year, this summer? So so in our Discord chat, John was posting that Demco wants out of Vancouver. My understanding was from that interview, and maybe again Steven can let us know because I believe that was Doug McLean who made the comment. My understanding is that Demco's just frustrated in playing right now. So it's I don't know if he wants out of Vancouver, but I just know that things are not going well for him right now. I don't think he wants. I mean, he's barely been back, so I don't know. It's not like he's even had to play even half the season yet, right? He's been out for most of the season right now. I don't know. I mean, the Canucks are gonna have to make a decision on Demco. There was an article yesterday where they were looking at the projections for contracts. And they were projecting all the Canucks players, and they had Kevin Lankinen, I think, coming in at 3 point something or whatever. Listen, I don't think Lankinen's ever going to be Thatcher Demco, but I think just to have just somewhat stable goaltending, I think the Canucks need to look at signing Kevin Lankinen. And I've said this many times on this show because you don't know what you're going to get with Demco at this point. I think right now the verdict's still out. I know there's a lot of people saying he's done and all this different stuff. I'm not there yet, but I think we really don't know, because the other worry too is, let's say the Canucks do move on from Demco. What if he goes on and plays like his old self, and then you got, you traded him at a time when he was very low. So I think the Canucks just got to ride it out with Demco and see what happens. But I mean, yeah, let's say for argument's sake, Demco did want out. Too bad. You signed a contract. You're here for a couple of years. You got to ride it out, especially when he hasn't been healthy. So I think the Canucks got to sit pat. And the one thing I like about this management group with Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford is they are knowing the worth of their assets. They're not going to go and make a trade for the sake of making a trade. So even if Demco did want to move, it's got to be something it's got to be a trade that makes sense for the Canucks at this point. Who do you think on the Canucks is tradable? Well, I think Miller, I think a lot of their assets are tradable that they have. It's just a matter of what the return's going to be like. I think there are teams interested. It's just a matter of the issue though is, and this is something that Pierre LeBrun reported yesterday, was that the Canucks are now open to futures. And I think you have to go that route when you're trading some of these core players, because let's be honest, most of these teams are capped out. You can't just trade a JT Miller for a couple prospects. There has to be money that makes sense. So I think JT Miller's tradable. I think Elias Pettersson's tradable, although I don't think you trade Pettersson right now. I know a lot of people are worried that, oh my God, this is going to be like Louis Eriksson all over again. But Pettersson's got that upside and he's still relatively young. I don't think people should be giving up on him now. I think let's see what happens if they get rid of Miller, see if there's any, maybe Pettersson plays better. I don't know, but you at least have to give Pettersson another shot. I know there's that issue of him with the no trade clause. So if you want to trade him now. But I think, I think you hold on to Pettersson a bit longer and then see what happens. And again, people think he can't be traded when his no trade clause kicks in. If he's playing badly and he's not having fun, he might want to move too. So there's a lot of situations that could unfold where the Canucks could unload Pettersson if things keep going the way they're going, which is him not playing great. And to be honest, I don't think he or his line played bad last night. I thought from what I saw, Pettersson actually played okay. The thing with Pettersson that's different with Miller is he's actually playing defense. There's he's not racking up the points like an $11.6 million player, but he's at least making plays that are, making him useful out there. Whereas I think with other players, it's not so much. So to answer your question, Who do I think is tradable? I would look at JT Miller. Obviously, he's been in the news. I would look at Brock Besser at this point because I don't think the Canucks want to sign him long term. And I think if you're Besser, you want a long-term secured deal. So you might have to look at him. Pius Suter as well. He's on a cheap contract. He's a guy you might look at moving, especially if the Canucks are on the outside looking in. Like, I think at this point, we're at the point now where the Canucks, I think, still need to see if there's a possibility of making the playoffs. I'm honestly not a fan of that because I think even if they make the playoffs, the Canucks are not going to go on some crazy run. Like last year, you could see there was a possibility of them going on a run. I don't feel that way this year unless they make a big trade. So I would be okay if they just wanted to call it a season right now and start trading assets and build for the future. I'd be fine with that. And I think that's when you're going to get some good value. Saying that, though, maybe you wait closer to the trade deadline. Teams are more desperate. Teams need certain players. So, again, I'd put Miller, Besser, and Pius Suter as options. Those would be the three that come to mind. I don't really know anyone else that other teams would be interested in terms of assets for the Canucks. February 3rd, 4th should be interesting. The IHF meeting is about to let Russia and Belarus back into the tournaments, apparently waiting to see what President Trump will do with the war. Very interesting. I mean, Russia's got to be in there. Listen, forget about the political side of things. It's just unfortunate we don't get to see Russian players compete with how much of an impact they're having on the NHL. I'm at the point now where I would like to see both Miller and Besser traded. I'm at that point now. Because I think, listen, I'm not a fan of how Rick Tocchet is coaching this team right now. I think it's very boring hockey. It's dump and chase hockey. Nobody wants to watch that stuff. And they're losing. Like if they were doing dump and chase hockey and they were winning, no one cares, but they're losing and they're still playing really bad. So I'm at the point, and we got Stephen Ellis here. We'll bring him on here in just 1 second, but I'll just finish my point here. I'm at the point where I think it's pretty obvious the core of the Vancouver Canucks is not getting it done. And because they've been through 4 coaches now. It was Green, Boudreau, Tocchet, and I think before, 3 coaches. Feels like 4, but what I'm saying is they've been through a lot of coaches with this core. It's not getting it done, and it's pretty obvious, and it's also pretty obvious the last season was a bit of a fluke. All right, happy to welcome back on the show Stephen Ellis from Daily Faceoff. We're going to talk all things Toronto Maple Leafs because it's just too depressing to talk about the Canucks right now. Stephen, how you doing?
I'm doing great. James, how you doing?
Doing awesome. So I wanted to get you on here, Stephen. I'm looking at the standings right now. We were just talking about this right now. The Leafs, once again, very successful in the regular season. Things are looking great, but I wanted to kind of gauge the temperature from your end with the Leafs, and we could talk a little prospects and stuff as well. But I wanted to start first with, is there a sense this season is different than others with the coaching change, with the fact that they have some solid goaltending and Stolarz? Like, is this a team that fans and even the media feels like could go on a run this playoffs?
I think so. Like when you look at this team right now, like again, every Leafs fan is kind of they're careful when it comes to expectations with this team because you know what happens every year come April and May. But when you look at what's working for this team, Mitch Marner's playing some fantastic hockey. John Tavares, before his injury, was playing some really good hockey. Austin Matthews looks to be back. Anthony Stolarz has been out for about a month, but Joseph Woll's been fantastic and was really big in that game I was at a few nights ago against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think the key here is that in the past, when one key guy was missing, they'd be in trouble, whether it be a goalie, whether it be Austin Matthews. When one of those guys would go down, that team would be in trouble. And it doesn't feel like that's a problem this year. And they're getting good goaltending most nights. They're going to be going back to Dennis Hildeby today, who hasn't been good in the NHL this year, but has been good in the AHL. But and you look at it, they're getting good buy-in from everybody. Bobby McMahon's playing really well. I thought Fraser Minton looked really good in his first game back since middle of December, I think it was. So the fact that it doesn't seem to matter who's in the lineup, they're finding ways to win. That's promising because depth has been an issue for this team in the past.
Yeah, and it's not just a team that's relying on their superstars to get it done. Like you mentioned, Matthews missed time. They were still able to get some wins. And I think the goaltending is really the big thing too. Like you have you have goaltending that the team can trust and they're still putting together good wins. And it's not, and again, you did mention Hildeby a little bit. I mean, when the backup comes in, or the third string, I guess in this case, because Wall is technically the backup, there is a bit of concern there. But for a third string goalie, I don't think that's a huge deal. In terms of Mitch Marner, and I think we talked about this the last time you were on, he's having a great season. Do you get the sense that he's going to be back with Toronto, or do you think they, sell high and try and see what they can do? Because I guess the other issue is the cap. What are they going to do with sort of, the cap situation that they're in right now? What's sort of your sense of how this Mitch Marner thing is going to play out?
Well, I think the good thing is the salary cap, it's been a few different numbers, but we are expecting a pretty sizable bump next year. So they should be able to afford a guy like him, especially if John Tavares does take a hometown discount now. He's 34 right now. He's going to be 35 on his next contract. So very well, we're not going to see a very long-term deal. We're not going to see a super expensive one, but you want to be able to bring those guys back, because I know there's been so much made about the core four not getting the job done, but you look at the teams that do win the Stanley Cup every year, and they typically have a core four or a core five. So you don't want to blow that up. If you get rid of Mitch Marner, first off, you're not trading him in season. If you did, you're going to lose that trade no matter what. And then you don't want to lose him for nothing in free agency. So he's a guy that, throughout all the criticism and everything, like, Mitch Marner wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, and he's going to make that happen. And the Leafs should make that happen, because he's one of the best two-way wingers in the NHL. The stats don't lie there. And then you look at just the way he's producing this year. It's like he's been outstanding, especially when they were missing Austin Matthews. So you want him there. He's going to be a key part of there. Yeah, there's some criticisms about how he shows up or doesn't show up in the playoffs, but you can point at a lot of different factors there. And then part of it is sometimes goaltending. A lot of the case, it was the defense that just couldn't get the job done, and the depth scoring not showing up, because a lot of teams will have their top players shut down in the playoffs because teams are trying to lock those guys down. Like, let's not forget, Connor McDavid didn't dominate the playoffs last year by any means.
Right.
But it was guys like Ryan McLeod and Connor Brown and these other guys that came, Matthias Janmark, who came up and also were important. So those elements are very crucial. But when it comes to Marner, you want him there long term, because he's an impact player.
Now, Brad Treliving obviously went through all this with Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary. Do you feel like a deal will get done before the playoffs? Because I think most people feel Marner does want to stay here. I think he's even publicly said that. But is there that element of risk where, hey, we got to get something done before the playoffs start, just to avoid what happened last time? I know they're different situations, but do you get that sense at all that they might be on having talks right now or something ongoing?
If it's probably in Marner's best interest to go out there and get a contract signed in advance, because we've seen kind of how things fall apart for him in the playoffs, right? So that wouldn't help his value there. But I think for everyone's sake, you probably just want to get that done, so that it is a situation where you're not having to worry about it down the line. You don't want to get too close to free agency, because things can fall apart there. And yeah, like you mentioned, we saw what happened in Calgary a couple of years ago, where Treliving was unable to sign some of those guys. We haven't seen him get into a situation where he's had to make a major decision like that yet in Toronto. And I could say, like, you look at some of the moves he made last summer, and most notably Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Anthony Stolarz have been two really key pieces for that team, and Chris Tanev too. So I think that so far his tenure in Toronto has looked good. So we'll see what happens here. But for me, the biggest thing that this team needed for years was a coaching change. They got it. Now let's see what happens when the playoffs begin.
Yeah. And it's great to see Berube doing well. It seems like he's been a great fit, even with the media and the players and all that. Like, there's a lot. It's not just you're coaching any other team. You've got that added pressure of the market, and everyone talking about every little detail. And I think Berube has done that in spades. And it's been great to see with the Leafs having a coach that can sort of handle all that. You touched on something there I wanted to get into, and I think we talked about this the last time you were on. Is the acquisitions in the offseason. You had Chris Tanev, you have Oliver Ekman-Larsson, you even had someone like Matt Pacioretty. How would you sort of grade some of those acquisitions as we're sort of entering the midway point of the season? Because it looks like, I've been watching OEL. I'm just looking at his stats here. He's got 19 points already. That's great for what you're paying him too, because this was a guy that the Canucks are still paying at this point, right? So it seems like all the acquisitions, for the most part, especially the goaltending you mentioned with Stolarz, have really worked out well for the Toronto Maple Leafs this season.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one key guy that doesn't get enough love is actually Steven Lorenz, and that made the team a more difficult group to play against in the bottom six. I think he only just took his first penalty of the season in the last game, but he's out there hitting guys. He's out there playing some really good defensive hockey, and he really is laying himself on the line every time he goes out there. And Max Pacioretty's health has been an issue yet again, unfortunately, but he's been good. Like, he's still a 35, 40-point guy when he's healthy, which not in his prime anymore, obviously at 36 years old, but that's still pretty good for someone who has missed as much time as he has. Interesting, the guy they just brought in today, actually, Jacob Whelan from the AHL. They signed him as a college free agent last year. I'm a big fan of him. I think he's a really good two-way defensive forward who was also a really good point producer in the NCAA at Quinnipiac, and scored the goal that helped Quinnipiac win its very first national title. So I think there's a lot kind of looking at there and saying, bringing that guy in for depth is a good sign, and that was a really good pickup by the Leafs management last year. But then you look at those high impact guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I feel like he's currently on the best stretch of his season from what I've seen. And yeah, Stolarz has missed a bunch of time, but he was a potential Vezina Trophy candidate for the first half of the season before his injury. So really good pickups there, like especially in Stolarz, where he's only worth $2.5 million. Like an unbelievable value pickup there, and he's been great. So yeah, I feel like with hindsight, that was a very impressive offseason for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and one of the key things with these teams that you do see go to the finals is those bargain contracts. You mentioned Stolarz. I think even OEL, considering what he's getting paid now, I think is a good deal for the Leafs as well. Even Max Pacioretty's been injured, but I mean, what's he making? Like very, very low compared to what he's used to being, has been paid in previous contracts. I think those are some key things. Looking at sort of the overall, cap allocation of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What do the Leafs need to do at the deadline? Do you think they look at a backup goaltender just because of the health of Wall and in case something happens to Stolarz? Do they look at any more depth pieces? What's sort of your sense? Again, we've got some time here. I think it's 5 or 6 weeks before the trade deadline, but it is creeping up on us quite soon. What are some things you think the Leafs need to address? And also, as sort of an addition to that question, it looks like they have a lot in the pipeline too. So if they wanted to make some moves, it looks like they have sort of some assets they could move if need be. What's sort of your sense on the needs and what could possibly get shipped out for the Leafs?
So Toronto does have one of the weaker prospect pools, but they do have options if they want to go out there and win now. Like, could they trade Easton Cowan to go get someone who's a bit of a longer term important player for them? Maybe. I doubt it. I think what they're probably looking here is to go out there and find some better bottom six depth. Find someone who could specifically go out there and make that third line harder to play against, because they've been kind of rotating who's that potential third line center. Is Max Domi really the best option there? Fraser Minton just played center for a couple of games, and he's been up and down in the NHL and AHL. So you need a guy who can go out there and be that third line center for you. And that's a tough one to really do, because it's a good trade deadline, but there's a lot of buyers this year. A lot of teams like Montreal or Boston, who are kind of these bubble teams that might be trying to fight into them too. But I think going out there and getting some third line help and maybe taking some of the pressure off of someone like Fraser Minton is a good thing. Maybe they go out there and get some scoring help as maybe an upgrade over Nick Robertson. They could trade him potentially, so we'll see there. But the Leafs aren't afraid to trade draft picks. They don't have a whole lot this year. They don't have their first round pick this year. They don't have their own second rounder, but they do have Florida's second rounder. They do have their next 2 first rounders, though. So could they trade one of those to get someone more long term? We'll see.
Yeah, and I think if you're in the position the Leafs are in, go for it. You might as well, you don't want to hold back. You've got this team, you've got a good sort of, and then the thing I think with the Leafs this season, and correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have to make a trade. Like, I feel like they're in a position right now where this team has proven, like we mentioned, the injuries, they can still get it done. There's other teams where you do have to worry about that. So do you not think as well that compared to past seasons, maybe where they're like, okay, we got to make a splash and we got to get someone and maybe move on. Do you feel like there's less pressure this year to do that, or am I off base here? I mean, you tell me, you're the Toronto guy.
I think you're right. They're like one guy to keep in mind is Calle Yarncroc at some point is going to come back from his injuries. He hasn't played a single game this year, but last year at a full season pace, he was on around 40 points. He had 39 points the year before that. So that would be a guy that in theory would give you some scoring depth. So you're kind of hoping he can stay healthy. But in terms of that, I think they have to be impressed with how their call-ups have looked. Again, going back to Fraser Minton for the 100th time. He's been good. Bobby McMahon, you mentioned value pickups. Like, this is a guy who's playing at a 50-point pace on $1.35 million contract. Like, that's outstanding, especially when you look at the fact it's the same money that Ryan Reeves is getting to basically do nothing out there. I think that when Pacioretty's healthy, he's good. So they do have these options. I think they're just looking for more depth and more opportunities to make sure they can go out there, because a lot of the teams that make these playoff runs are the ones that are just going out there and addressing specific needs lower in the lineup. You're not going out there and acquiring a Connor McDavid at the trade deadline. You're looking to go get a guy who might get you another 4 or 5 goals the rest of the regular season, but will also be very valuable for the playoffs. You're looking for things like that. And if they're going to do that, great. But Toronto doesn't really need to, because they do have some decent options. But for sure, if they are going to make a trade, number 3 center. That's what you got to do.
Last sort of stuff on the Leafs, and then we'll kind of get into the Eastern Conference as a whole and some other news. I was curious, like, what do you think Tavares' next contract could look like? Like, we've seen sort of, I'll give you a quick example with the Canucks. Obviously, Tyler Myers got I think it was $6 million a season prior to him taking sort of this discount. It ended up being 3. Now, John Tavares is a lot better than Tyler Myers, but when we think of veteran contracts, like team-friendly hometown contracts, what do you think that looks like for Tavares specifically? Because, obviously he's getting up there in age, but he wants to stay, and I'm sure he also wants to help the team win, even from a cap perspective. perspective, if you had to sort of, rate his contract next time, what just as a ballpark, what do you think it'll end up being?
It'll be interesting. Like, I think a lot of people are looking at this and saying like, hey, $5 million be great. And I bet you the Leafs would love that. But realistically, the way he's playing, like he might play himself into that $6-7 million range, maybe $8 million. And I think depending on the length of the contract, that could be fine because he has shown that he's kind of had this revival this year that he can be very good. He was definitely in the running to make Canada's Four Nations team pretty early on. And I do think that he could probably make a bit more money on the open market, but he seems to like it here in Toronto. He grew up in Oakville, not too far away, or actually where I'm from. His family's there. Like, I don't see him leaving to go out there and chase a bigger paycheck. I think he believes in what the Leafs are doing there. I do expect a big discount from the $11 million he's making, but I wouldn't expect it to be over 8, and I wouldn't expect it to be 4. So we'll see somewhere in that range is my guess.
What about term? Do you think a 3-4 year deal? Like what are we looking at here? Because I think he's 37 now, if I'm not mistaken. So you're probably looking at he's going to, I think 3-4 years. That seem reasonable?
So he's 34, about to turn 35.
34. Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
So he's got a couple more years there. I guess the one thing is I never seem to know what they're going to do with their contract lengths there because they just signed Chris Tanev to like a 6-year deal as a 35-year-old guy who leaves games a lot or leaves his shifts a lot because of blocking shots. And that's a big toll on your body. I think for Tavares, I wouldn't expect more than a 3-year deal. Like, he's a type of guy where I feel like if he's 37, 38, wins a Stanley Cup, if that ever happens in Toronto, I feel like he's like, all right, I've accomplished enough. I've done enough. Let's move on. We'll see there. But this is a guy that is competitive. He wants to win. He hasn't chased that cup. And I think he's going to be willing to do whatever it takes and whatever contract length it takes to get it.
And I think part of the term for Tanev was there were so many other teams after him, right? And he's kind of a unique player where he can block shots. He's a good locker room guy. So you're kind of getting that added bonus as much as Tavares is producing. Getting a guy like Tanev was kind of unique on the market last year. So I think that was part of the thinking of giving him a longer term deal. But, there's always the Vegas, strategy of, hey, maybe this player's not going to be playing for us on the IR and we'll figure something out there. So we'll see what happens. If you have any questions for Steven, by the way, let me know in the chat. We'll get to those. I just want to quickly have a quick glance at the Eastern Conference here and just kind of get your thoughts on the overall picture. I mean, Washington continuing to reign supreme in the division. Any sort of surprises or any teams you think could maybe either rise up or rise down in the division? Obviously, Montreal's making a big push. It certainly looks like they might be making the playoffs, but I think Columbus as well has got a little bite too. What's sort of your thoughts on sort of the playoff picture as we're sort of looking towards the playoffs here in a number of months?
Keep an eye on the Ottawa Senators because they're right now in a wild card spot, and they've been playing for about a month without their starting goalie, Linus Ullmark. So they've been a bit shaky, a bit all over the place, but I feel like that when they get him back and when they get that full team together, they're in really good shape. Of course, Montreal is definitely one to watch. Jacob Dobez, I just wrote about him yesterday, 5-0 to start his NHL career. Unbelievable start for a guy who, by all accounts, is their third goalie, but he's been so impressive. And it's not like he's going out there and beating like the Buffalo Sabres or the New York Islanders. Like, he's going out there, he's beaten Florida, he's beaten Colorado, he beat the Capitals. Like, he's beat really good teams so far early this season. Even the Rangers, a team that that people wrote off too early. And right now they're looking really good there. They're 6-1-3 in the last 10 games. Very close to making that 7-1-2 if they hadn't fallen apart against the Montreal Canadiens. But I think those are the 3 teams that you're looking at there. And that's what's making this race really interesting is there's so many competitive teams. Like, you look at the Detroit Red Wings, they got 47 points. They're 8th place in the wild card race. First place has 52 points. Yeah. Just, all it takes is one really good week from a team to change everything, right? And I think that's what's really cool here. This Eastern Conference race is it is going to come down to the wire, and in recent years, we've seen some teams, it's more of a, we're just trying to lose as many times as humanly possible and see what happens. This case, I think it's just kind of all over the place.
2 more quick questions for you, and then we'll get you out of here, Steven. Always appreciate you stopping by. A former Leafs general manager, Kyle Dubas. I know he's been getting a lot of heat this year for some of the decisions he made in Pittsburgh. We obviously heard about the Tristan Jarry. I got his jersey up here. Poor Tristan, not going to be playing for the Penguins. But we heard this week, it was sort of revealed that they're looking at maybe doing a fire sale. What do you think that could look like? Like, how far do you think they could go with this? I don't know if a Crosby gets moved necessarily, but do you wonder? Do you have Marcus Pettersson as a UFA? Like, what are some moves you think they could make? Because I think that's a really interesting situation to see where they could be making some moves as other teams are looking to add.
Isn't that wild though? They go out there and get Erik Karlsson like 2 summers ago, and they're like, "Yeah, we're done. We're just giving up. We're just going to start selling off
I know.
everything." What a weird situation. Which brings me to Erik Karlsson. I think is a guy that we'll see if teams are interested in him. I still think he's a good player, not as great defensively as he should have. And it was interesting when there was a former GM of Sweden, the GM of the 22 Olympic team, that said, like, I would not have brought Erik Karlsson to the Olympics or to the Four Nations face-off because of his defensive play. But, $10 million, that's a tough sell. Like, the Penguins are going to have to retain a lot of that salary. But if that means going out there and maybe getting a couple first-round picks, that could be something this team needs. Because you look at it, and Malkin's 38, Crosby's 37, Chris Letang's 37. Like, those guys have very few years left of competitive hockey. They probably should have blown things up right after their second Stanley Cup in a row. Like, in hindsight, they shouldn't have kept trying to go for it. They should have said, okay, we want to still have a chance to go out there and win a couple years from now. But they've traded away so many of their first round picks. Then you go and look at Samuel Poulin has not developed into the player they were hoping when he was a first round pick. So they haven't had a lot of draft capital to go out there and really fix things. So, what moves do you make there? Cody Glass probably doesn't bring you much. Do they reflip Philip Tomasino after he started off strong and he hasn't looked really good? Maybe Drew O'Connor, who has seen some time of Crosby. Maybe you go out there and like at this point, you need a goalie upgrade because those two guys in Nedeljkovic and Blomqvist can be good, but they've also proven that they could be bad. So there's a lot of things all over the place here. And when it comes to it, it's a tough because they don't have a ton of attractive assets. They don't have a lot of guys that are like pending UFAs that bring in value. Like the guys that they have are pending UFAs outside of maybe Marcus Pettersson are just whatever guys. So they're in a tough spot, but they need to find a way to go out there and regain those assets because the fact is they got their next 3 first rounders. They don't have a second rounder this year. So that's going to be a bit difficult to kind of go out there and replenish those prospects quickly. And fortunately, they don't have a lot of guys coming up. So it's a really difficult spot. Like, pretty much should just sell off everybody, but they should have started that a few years ago instead of going out there and getting Erik Karlsson and trying to win everything.
Well, I even think when Dubas came aboard, they had all that cap space, and now it's all gone, right? Like they get the Karlsson trade, they got Graves, like they signed Jari, which I guess in hindsight maybe not the worst move. Like back then, I think they believed in him, and then I don't know what's happened to him. I don't know if it's mental, physical, whatever, but it just doesn't look NHL caliber. I just think like how different things could have been when Dubas took over, but I think there was maybe pressure for him as well, leaving the Leafs being like, I got to do something big, and it backfired, right? Like he took the risk of getting Karlsson, and it just hasn't worked out. So I'll be keeping an eye on the Penguins. I got to ask you, just because it's been all over the news and you guys have done great coverage over at Daily Faceoff. JT Miller, what's going on? What's your gut feeling, guys? Is there anything? Because the thing that I think people are worried about is that the Canucks are not trading from a position of strength. They know that he's 32. They know that, like we don't know if that, we saw glimpses of it on Saturday against the Oilers, but we don't know if there's going to be that player consistently going forward. So what's sort of your sense on how this is going to unfold? I think it's undoubtedly he's going to get traded. It's just a matter of like, where's there a fit?
Yeah, and it's such a shame that that's the way it's going to go, right? Like JT Miller at his best, we saw him get 102 points or 103 points a couple of years ago. No, last year, I think it was. And
last year, yeah.
That,
the PDO bender last year.
Yeah, last year. And then you look at the year before that, and it was kind of a down year for him, and he got a point per game. Like, this is someone who's been one of the most productive players in the Western Conference the last couple of years, been so good for the Vancouver Canucks. And if that team's going to go out there and make a push, like, you need him to be good. Clearly, it's like he missed a bunch of time and he still outproduced Elias Pettersson. But the issue is, you ask around the league. There's a lot of teams that kind of view him as damaged goods because of the reported rifts between him and many players at different teams and different levels of hockey. Like, this dates back to junior level, and it's disappointing because he's such an important player. He can be so good, and at his best, again, we know he can get 100 points or at least come close to that. So I think they're going to lose a trade for him no matter what. It'll be interesting to see which teams do target. Obviously, Carolina's been linked to him. They got some good pieces. I think he's a guy they could really use for this playoff push. But how do you go out there and win a trade when it feels like Miller's value is at an all-time low? I don't know, but it does seem like it's only a matter of time until he's shipped out, and we'll see if that really changes the Canucks. I'm not sure it does.
Well, I also think we found out yesterday that they are willing to take on futures, and I think that could be the move to do because they want basically to replace a Miller or have like still a competitive team, but I think that like teams are so capped out right now, like you have to make the money work, right? So there's that part of it too. What I do wonder, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, do they acquire picks and do something like what they did in the Bo Horvat trade, which is, use that first round pick to go get a Filip Hronek? Maybe they could do something similar with Miller where they get a pick or two and then flip that for another impact player. I know it's hard to do, but I kind of think that might be the only way you even come close to winning this, because we're seeing some of the offers out there, and I think that's why it hasn't happened yet. The offers haven't been good enough for what the Canucks want.
I think you nailed it. It's the thing. Like, I think people will look at trades and like, oh, like they'll flip this asset. Like that never happens. Like maybe a third rounder gets flipped, but we don't see players getting flipped. We don't see first rounders getting flipped. It just doesn't happen in the NHL. So it'd be interesting, but it feels like, yeah, like you're right. Like it's going to be hard to make a JT Miller trade work without it being maybe a 3-team deal and one team takes on some retained salary. But, a team like San Jose has used retained salary spots, and Montreal has too. So some of these teams that have typically been good third trade partners don't have the room to be able to kind of take on some of that salary there. So it'll be interesting. I wonder if Miller doesn't go to a contender. He goes to a team that is rebuilding, and by the time they're ready to contend, he's kind of just at his like, all right, couple more good years of hockey. Let's see what happens there. But again, just a disaster all around in the situation here where the Canucks on paper have a lot of talent, but feels like everything's just imploding on themselves. Look at goalies and Thatcher Demco, man, if he's healthy this year, like, wow, like totally different story, I think, for this team heading into this, and everyone's looking forward to a long playoff run. But I think, again, it's hard to win a trade there.
No, and the other wrinkle in this too is Miller, we're hearing, only wants to go to the Eastern U.S. He doesn't want to go to like a rebuilding team, and he has got the no trade clause, so he sort of has a say in that. I mean, that's the thing with Pettersson. He doesn't, but then I actually curious, last question before we get out of here. What do you think of Pettersson? Because I'm, a lot of people here in Vancouver are like, trade him, but I'm like, there's potential here. Like, you don't want this to turn into Jack Eichel with Buffalo, right? Where they get rid of him and they don't get the assets back. Buffalo, look how far behind they are, although they did win last night, but that's saying more about the Canucks, I think, than the Sabres. But I just worry you trade a Pettersson and he goes on this crazy run and then wins a cup, and then everyone's wondering why they traded him. I think you'd be a little bit more patient with him. Saying that, though, how many wingers have they gone through with him? They traded Kuzmenko, they traded Mikheyev, they brought in Jake DeBrusk, and it's still not getting the push. So I don't know, just your thoughts on Pettersson and his potential, because you're a data guy. What do you think it's worth it to hold on and see if there's something here?
If you trade him this season, you're trading him at the absolute worst value he's ever been at. So
right,
kind of like with JT Miller, like you lose trades like that, and that's the thing. Most times when teams trade a star player, they lose that deal. Buffalo Sabres did that a few times, unfortunately. Now, when you look at getting rid of Reinhart and getting rid of Jack Eichel for sure, but when it comes to this team and what they got to do with Pettersson, like I've been on board of sit him for like a week or two. Just make him have a mental reset. Let him go do something else for a bit and try and just relax and figure things out, because there's a certain point when a guy who puts up so many points and, 89 points last year, over 100 points the year before that, like we know how productive he can be. It feels like when you're not producing and you're going on these long streaks, it's so tough mentally. And we see that a lot with younger prospects, especially when they make the jump up to a different level, whether it be to college, whether it be to the pro ranks, where when they're not producing, it's really tough on them mentally, and they start trying a little too hard and it doesn't work, and then everything can kind of fall apart. It feels like he's frustrated. It feels like he knows he's not playing anywhere near like he should. Would it kill them at this point to just say, hey, we're going to shut you down for a couple of weeks and just see what happens? Like, come back, refresh, fresh start, no pressure on you. Let's see what happens. That's what I'd be doing right now. And I feel like that's something that maybe more teams should look to do with some guys when they start to fall apart, is he's not actively making them worse, but he's not going out there and doing the things that they need him to, especially on his expensive new contract. So I think, would anyone complain if they sat him for a little bit? I don't think so. They shouldn't, because you want him to come back and be as good as he possibly can and be ready to go, especially if this team thinks they have a chance at the playoffs. So that's what I would do.
Well, that's the thing. I think part of it is, and this is just my theory, I have no insight into this, but I think the owner, he got a little taste of the playoffs last year. It's like, we can't sit Pettersson because we need to try and win these games. I almost wish the Canucks were worse this season, because then I think that decision would be made, and it probably would benefit them. But I think they're so hell-bent on making the playoffs because of what happened last year that they're willing to, you're right, like how come Pettersson can't get a mental break or whatever it is for a week or two, but Miller can? Like, that's the thing I don't get. So I just don't think all the options have been exhausted with Pettersson. Like you just mentioned, sit him, rest him. And that's why I think, like, you wait on a little bit, because the contract's not great, but there's potential there. With Miller, he's 32. This is what you're getting with him at this point, and it's like a matter of him getting in the right space. Steven, we've taken up way too much time. Thank you so much for doing this. We'll definitely get you back on. I still got to get out to Toronto. I'm trying to get my wife to, we'll head out there. I always like going there a couple times a year. We still got to grab that beer. But in the meantime, anything you got coming up on Daily Faceoff, anything you want to plug, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, first off, it's cold here, so
it's -1 here in Vancouver. It's like a little slightly more than hoodie weather here, but not as bad as those Toronto winters. I'm certainly not missing that. So
yeah, we had like -21 or 22 a couple yesterday. Like it was brutal, and I was outside with shorts for some stupid reason. So I guess I'm doing a lot of stories on so many different topics. I'm going to be looking at the goaltending class for the 2025 NHL draft coming up on Friday. If you like goalies, I like to tweet about goalies, and I play goalie myself, so I post video clips of me playing goalie. A lot of draft content coming up, a lot of Four Nations face-off content coming up. I'm looking forward to that. I know maybe not everyone's favorite tournament, but I think it's going to be pretty cool seeing best on best again. So I guess just follow me on social media, SLS Hockey on X, and Blue Sky. I think it's StephenPEllis.ca is my name there.
There you go. Stephen Ellis, guys. Thank you so much, Stephen. We'll talk to you soon, man. Appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, thanks so much.
There you go. Stephen Ellis, one of our favorites here on the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Great dude. Great insight. If you guys are looking for prospect stuff, he is on top of that all the time. He goes to all the games. Really good stuff over there. And I'm a huge fan of what Daily Faceoff's doing. They got Frank Saravalli. They got, so many people over there just doing an awesome job with the hockey coverage. To be honest, I follow so much hockey stuff because I cover MMA. So it's nice to get a break from that. And that's what I really enjoy. And I definitely go check out what Steven's doing. Really, really great work. Not just, like I said, remotely. He's going to the games and looking up all that stuff as well. Let's switch gears a little bit. We talked about the Leafs. We talked about the Canucks. Let's look ahead to tonight's games and kind of get some thoughts on that. Again, appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys have any questions, let me know. So for tonight, we just have a couple games on the slate here, just 3 total. Actually, no, we've got more because I don't know why Bodog splits it up like this. But we got the Bruins and the Devils right now. The Bruins, I mentioned they're struggling, but actually New Jersey lost the other night too. Jersey are favorites at -220. A little too much for my liking there. I'm probably going to avoid that game altogether. So no bet for me there. And again, the Bruins have been super unpredictable as well as a whole. That's another team to keep an eye on. If the Bruins keep sort of falling down the list a little bit, do they make a big trade? I do wonder if they look at some of their assets and maybe look, because they're another team that doesn't just have a lot in the pipeline as far as prospects and all that. They're also a team that I heard is potentially linked to JT Miller. I can't imagine the Canucks, trading, doing any sort of deals with the Bruins at this point. It would be so weird to see Miller in a Bruins uniform. Just saying, as an optic thing there. I got the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Leafs are at home -195. I think it's worth a stab. Columbus can surprise though, but you know what? The Leafs are always a good bet. I will probably be betting that tonight. You got the Jets and the Avalanche. The Jets are on the road. The Avs, they've been sort of hit or miss. I think the Jets might be worth a stab here. You kind of maybe look to wait to see if they get to plus money, but the Jets are never a bad bet overall. I know, what was it a couple nights ago, Scott Arniel, their coach, flat out said, and I like coaches like this. Scott Arniel comes out and he's like, that was embarrassing. That was our worst performance of the season. It was embarrassing. I don't mind that. And granted, he can get away with it, or they can get away with it, I should say, because of the fact that Winnipeg has had so much success this season that they're able to have games like that. If Rick Tocchet came out and said embarrassing game, it's only going to make the Canucks play even worse. So that's not one to sort of think of. And you got the Panthers and the Kings. Kings -112 at home might be worth a stab. The Panthers played last night. I don't believe the Kings did, or did they? No, the Kings didn't play last night. So you're getting the Kings at home. Kings have been pretty solid overall throughout the season. Panthers are the better team, but Kings at -112 might be worth a stab as well. So those are some bets to think of for tonight. Again, not an expert here, but always like giving you guys my hockey plays. Okay, let's get a few more questions here, guys, and then we'll wrap things up. I got to hop into another stream after this. What do we have? I am happy for Winnipeg, my team, but I still think they need to add a top six winger and some defense. A winger we didn't really talk about. Let me just look at his contract here real quick. Let me have a quick look here. There's one team. This is a teaser, as we like to call in the industry. I wanted to see here. Mikko Rantanen. I know he's a center. What's going to happen with him? There's been no talks, as far as I know, with Colorado. He's a UFA next year. You got to imagine Colorado wants to put something together. 9.2 he's going to want to raise. Who's even got the cap space to accommodate that? What do you do if you're Colorado? If you can't sign him, you don't want to let him go away. He's also a big part of your team. What's he even doing this year stats wise? I need to look at that for a little bit. Let's see how he's doing this season. I don't even know. It's hard to follow every team. So yeah, you look at it there. Rantanen's second on the team. He's got 63 points. So if you're like a Utah or something, that might be something you got to look at teams that have got cap space and have assets to trade. So is that something you entertain if you're Colorado, if you're not close on a contract? That's something I would be looking at for that. But yeah, as far as wingers go, I'm trying to, well, hey, how about Brock Besser? Do the Jets have assets that would be interesting to the Canucks if they want to trade Brock Besser? I don't, and isn't Winnipeg's kind of close to, actually, no, I don't know if it's close to Minnesota. I'm not good geography-wise, but Brock Besser would seem like a good fit there for the Jets. But what do they have that could be going the other way? Neil Ponk, I don't think is going to get it done. They'd have to use something more than that. So I don't know. What are some wingers that are available that could be trade bait? The other thing is you got to look at like, Nashville and Pittsburgh and these other teams that are, look like on the outside looking in. Could they find something there? So that's something to sort of keep in mind. Also with Winnipeg, Ehlers, another guy they have not, I don't know if there's been talks there about re-signing him. That might be something to keep an eye on too. This is what I love. I love when you got teams that have some UFAs because things can get really interesting with the league if you got players that want to, sort of move around a bit. Hot take, Hellebuck is phenomenal, but Logan Thompson should definitely be a contender for the Vezina. Yeah, okay, I'm here for that. I think the PDO numbers for Winnipeg are pretty high though, and it's because of Hellebuck. So I don't know, like who's more valuable, Hellebuck to Winnipeg or Thompson to the Capitals? That's hard to say. I think they're kind of like even in that regard. I'm here for that take. I'm totally here for that take. And coming from a Winnipeg guy, that's actually interesting to hear, John. So I'm totally there for it. But 4x4 for Lankinen, I think, is smart. Let me find that tweet from yesterday that I was referencing. It had like projected salaries. I actually retweeted it yesterday. Let me find it here. Where is it? Let me find this. I thought I tweeted this yesterday. 1 second. Or it might have been from the other day. Bear with me here, guys. I'm going to find this tweet. But it looked at like projections from contracts for certain players. I think it's further up here. Why can't I find this? Oh my goodness. Here we go. Shout out to Noah Strang. Does a great job covering the Canucks. So he had some projections for Canucks contracts. This whole article was about like mid-season projections, which I should actually follow this account. So they've got Lankinen at 2 years, $3.8 million. You're right. He probably would want closer. I would give Lankinen 4 at this point because you don't know what you're getting with Demco. And I think Lankinen, there's some stability there. Again, you're not getting Demco level goaltending, but it's something worth considering. So, yeah, I would look at that. And yeah, I don't think Besser or Suter is going to be back for the Canucks. So I'd be fine with 4x4 for Lankinen and then figure out the rest of the salary. You're going to lose some guys. So it's going to be a very interesting little bit here for the Vancouver Canucks as they go forward. Okay, guys, good time to end this. Thank you so much for tuning in. Big shout out to Stephen Ellis for joining us here on the show. If there's any guests you guys want on the show, I'll try or like any, people, any particular teams you want me to focus on, let me know in the comments or hit me up on Twitter and let me know. I'm always trying to get different guests. I know we've been getting a lot of returning guests, but I don't have the net I have in MMA when it comes to getting certain guests on. So I'm going to try and work on that a bit more, get you guys some different guests. But Stevens is as good as it comes when it comes to insight on not only prospects, but obviously the Leafs as well. So appreciate him for tuning in. All right, guys, I will see you next week. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday. Have a good one, and appreciate you watching.